Saruman versus Count Dooku. Which one is more evil? These two characters are notable villains in their respective franchises, and coincidentally, they both happen to be played by the enigmatic Christopher Lee. In terms of similar traits, there's quite a few to mention. Both Saruman and Dooku started off as part of the forces of light, but gradually became corrupted over time and served the forces of darkness plaguing their universe. Both were ambitious and sought to usurp their master's position of power behind their backs, but ultimately, both ended up unsuccessful in doing so. And just like how Dooku prepared a new fighting force with the clone army, on a similar note, Saruman created a new army with the Uruk-hai for his destructive purposes. But before we delve deeper, a small note to be aware of. What I'm going to cover about Saruman will be a hybrid of the books and the movies. I know it's technically not canon to pick and choose, but I feel it's the best approach that allows a background of Saruman while still relating to most of you who've only seen the movies. Now, let's begin contrasting them, starting with their reasons for their turning to evil. For Saruman, he was one of the 5 representatives sent to Middle-earth to aid the race of men and elves in removing the threat of Sauron completely. Saruman and the other wizards were of the same race as Sauron, but were forbidden from rising to the same levels of power and lording it over the free peoples of Middle-earth. Relatively early on in his life, a character flaw is seen with Saruman, namely in the form of pride and envy against his compatriot, Gandalf. Saruman was denied one of the elven rings of power, which was bestowed upon Gandalf instead for being deemed to be a more worthy bearer. Further strife was also seen when Saruman wasn't chosen to be the leader of the White Council, and was only appointed to the role after Gandalf declined the position. These incidents were particularly damaging to Saruman's pride, as he was the first wizard to arrive in Middle-earth, and also the leader of their Order of the Astari. Gandalf was the last to arrive, yet he received preferential treatment from the elves, which caused Saruman to fear losing his position as head of the wizards. So there is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario here. Was Saruman rejected by the elves because of his questionable character, or was the rejection by the elves a catalyst for his downfall? Perhaps the answer is a mixture of both, but regardless, Saruman's insecurity and vanity became expressed in a desire for power. Over the years, Saruman extensively studied the lore of Sauron in hopes of defeating him, but somewhere down the line, the animosity that he held against Sauron turned on its head to become admiration, with the White Wizard seeking to imitate him in ruling Middle-earth by force. This desire was further amplified by Saruman's occupation of Isengard in the Tower of Orthanc. There, Saruman uncovered many lost treasures, most notably a seeing stone known as a Palantir, which gave him more direct exposure to Sauron himself. This was the final nail in the coffin in the conversion of Saruman to an agent of the Dark Lord, having been intimidated by threats from Sauron, while at the same time seduced with promises of rulership. In part, this was also motivated by a sense of hopelessness and self-preservation, in which Saruman laments on his weakening faith in the ability of elves and men to withstand Sauron's might. Saruman's greed would also be amplified by a ring of his own making, which not only boosted his natural abilities, but his character flaws of jealousy and an insatiable appetite for power. Now, although what I've just described was brief, it should be noted that Saruman's defection to Mordor happened gradually over the course of 2 millennia. As for Count Dooku, I've covered his background and some of his reasons for becoming a Sith Lord in my previous video versus Darth Maul, but the main point that bears emphasizing is that of Dooku's disillusionment with the Jedi, a notion that arose due to his perception that the Jedi were becoming too attached to the government, and instead of serving the common people of the Republic as they should have, they were preoccupied with serving its corrupt leaders instead. Wanting to make an impactful change to the galaxy, Dooku aligned himself with Darth Sidious, and from there, the diabolical duo orchestrated the Clone Wars, a state of conflict that inflicted much turmoil on many systems of the galaxy. So, in looking at their reasons for turning to the forces of evil, we have Saruman's pride, his jealousy, and his appetite for power, compared to Dooku throwing in the towel with the Jedi and looking to impact the galaxy in his own misguided way. In light of this, I'm more comfortable with deeming Saruman's downfall as being more evil than that of Dooku's. It's a completely self-centered motivation with nothing redeemable, in which Saruman would simply replace Sauron, effectively trading one tyrannical ruler for another. Dooku's reasons, while unfortunate, still have some elements of truth to them. The Jedi were indeed becoming inept in fulfilling their duties to the Republic, and he wanted to address this injustice, to bring order to the galaxy. So at least there was some consideration for the well-being of others, the common folk. Unlike Saruman, Dooku wasn't completely in it for himself, or at least not so at the start of his journey into the dark side. Okay, next, let's look at how their moralities degenerated after they changed loyalties. For Saruman, we see that he has become open to torture, as seen in his imprisonment and affliction of Gandalf after his newfound allegiance to Sauron was discovered. In doing the bidding of his new master, Saruman displays a disturbing moral decadence when he uses foul magic to crossbreed orcs with goblin men, signifying just how twisted and vile his character has become. On an equally disturbing note, we find that Saruman's misuse of magic is expanded with his possession of King Theoden, taking control of his mind and will in an attempt to destroy Rohan for his master. However, while Saruman plays the part of an obedient subordinate, yet in his ambitious greed, he desires the One Ring for himself and seeks to acquire it behind Sauron's back, sending a small faction of Uruks led by their leader Lurtz to assault the Fellowship. I suppose it's a testament to the arrogance of Saruman that while he himself would be willing to betray Sauron, yet it doesn't occur to him that the feeling is mutual and that the Dark Lord simply viewed him as a puppet to be used. As Gandalf had to point out, there is only one Lord of the Ring, and he does not share power. In Saruman's viewpoint, however, he only sees two possible outcomes, both of which are win-win for him. Either he would be the ultimate ruler of Middle-earth, or be the second in command for whoever is first. Now, let's move on to Count Dooku's morality descent. Dooku has a much longer rap sheet than that of Saruman due to a longer narrative, but the ones that are most notable are as follows. Deception is a major recurring trait with Dooku, but a particularly heinous one would be his deliberate sabotage of the ship belonging to the character that would be known as General Grievous, causing him to suffer major injuries such that Dooku could transform him into a cyborg. The cherry on top would be the lie that the Jedi were responsible for the damage to his ship, sparking a burning hatred against them that would become useful for Dooku. Torture is also a frequent practice with Dooku, not just for his opponents, but his allies as well, particularly with Force lightning as punishment for failure, as we see in the case with his apprentices. Over time, Dooku would develop somewhat of a xenophobia, a disdain for non-human species, and believing that humans should be the ones in authority. And just as with Saruman, Dooku would seek to supplant Darth Sidious. But his ambition isn't as vast, as Dooku was even willing to kill Ventress as a show of loyalty to his master. Also similarly to Saruman, Dooku failed to realize that he was also viewed as a mere pawn, one that would be unceremoniously discarded when his usefulness had come to an end, which eventually became his undoing. Dooku's hands are drenched in the blood of his casualties, but a particularly egregious case would be the killing of his own sister for believing she would reveal his secrets to the Jedi right after her pleas to turn him back to the light side fell on deaf ears. So, in looking at the level of depravity that both Saruman and Dooku descended to, both have quite a number of atrocities. With Saruman, the burning of the Westfold with all its casualties, combined with the deaths of the men and elves at the assault on Helm's Deep, can all be attributed to his white hand, a mark that has now become associated with terror. With Dooku, we have his usage of his charisma and gentlemanly demeanor to recruit more systems into the Separatist cause and perpetuate genocide in a galaxy-wide war. The slaughter of the Jedi in Order 66 is also partially attributed to him, as it was he who ensured the change in the inhibitor chips that allowed the clones to turn on their masters. So, in comparing both Saruman and Dooku, I feel that Dooku has the edge here in terms of being more wicked on a micro scale. Although Saruman is equally capable of torture, selfish ambition, and a disregard for sentient life as well, there is a certain chilling aspect in the murder of a family member, as was the case with Dooku, especially one pleading for your redemption. Perhaps Saruman might have done something similar, but given that he is without a family in the same sense as Dooku, we can only speculate. But, on a whole, I would still put Saruman as more evil than Dooku overall. Again, coming back to their reasons for turning evil, Saruman's motives were more self-serving than Dooku's, wanting to either save his own skin or rule Middle-earth out of prideful greed. You might say Dooku was misguided, but he was at least right about one thing, that the Republic was corrupt and the Jedi were complacent. But of course, Dooku's motives don't hold up as well when we realize that the empire he was aspiring to create was a worse version of the Republic he despised. Then we also have their original purpose to take into account. Dooku fell to the dark side, but so have several other Jedi over the course of the ages. Saruman is unique in the sense that he was expressly sent for the goal of helping the free people of Middle-earth in their fight against Sauron. For him to end up doing the exact opposite is a complete distortion and an epic failure of his purpose on every level. And finally, we can look at the results of their endgame. If Saruman were to have his way, then it's not too far a stretch to suggest that Middle-earth would have been subject to a transformation like that of Isengard, going from a peaceful place adorned with lush greenery to one riddled with the furnaces of war. The Uruk-hai are the only creatures that bear absolute, unwavering loyalty to Saruman, and it's probable that he would populate the Freelands with them in his rule. Personally, I'd rather live in an obscure system somewhere in the Empire than in a Middle-earth ruled by Saruman. Anyway, for those reasons, I submit that Saruman can be deemed to be more evil than Count Dooku. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And thanks for watching.